Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. lawmg.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk, artificial intelligence has been revolutionizing a number of industries. Now farming is making use of new technologies.
We do a lot with basically trying to automate machines in general, but specifically around row crop agriculture.
Experts hope AI can help answer the challenge of feeding the world's growing population. Bloomington is exploring changes to the College and Walnut Corridor in hopes of improving the main north-south thoroughfare through town.
We want to consider lots of options. We want to look at the outcomes we want to see as a community.
One option being considered would make both streets two-way. And we look at a new report by the state that explains where school voucher money is going and who is using it. We'll have these stories plus the latest news from across the state right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Hello and welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Perry Metz, sitting in for Joe Wren. Indiana's voucher program to pay for student tuition at private and religious schools cost more taxpayer money this year than last. And as Indiana Public Broadcasting's Eric Weddle reports, students who received vouchers are also less racially diverse than last year.
The school voucher program was originally intended to help low-income students. In the past decade, the state's Republican majority expanded eligibility. A new state report describes the average student now using a voucher as white and coming from a home with an income of $81,000. Indiana's median household income is much less than that. The report says more than 53,000 students used a voucher last school year. The program cost the state more than $300 million. Next month, a new law will make nearly all students eligible for a voucher. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Eric Weddle.
We're joined now by WFYI reporter Eric Weddle, who's covered the issue for Indiana Public Broadcasting. Eric, the voucher program was originally designed for low-income families, but as I understand it, only around 30% of recipients last year were from families making less than $50,000. Why is that?
Since the program started, more than a decade ago, there's been different changes to it to increase the eligibility. And some of the first changes were, based around extra tracks of eligibility. But during the Mike Pence administration, the income eligibility was increased. And at that time, that led to a tripling of the program for more eligibility families. And then in 2021, lawmakers again increased it to the $154,000 eligibility requirement. So that allowed families who are already attending private schools to basically automatically become eligible. So families who were already maybe paying tuition at a private or religious school, they could then apply and qualify and get that voucher.
Who are these people? What is the average school voucher user? What do they look like?
Right, so right now, according to this report just released by the state, the average student who is qualifying is female, is in the elementary school age, is white, and comes from a family that makes about $81,000 a year. And that's different in terms of income to the median income in the state, which is around $62,000 a year. I think it is good to note that across Indiana, about 62% of students currently attending a public school, or all schools in Indiana, are white.
A new law is going to expand eligibility to almost all students. What financial impact will that have on public school funding?
Right, so when this new law goes into effect, in July, it's going to increase the eligibility to around $220,000, which is going to, like you said, make nearly every family in the state eligible. That's going to allow about an estimated 41,000 additional students qualify over the next 2 years. So for those students, the school districts that they are in, those school districts could see a shift in their funding. The state is making an estimate that that's going to be over $1 billion in funds over the next 2 years. So it's really going to depend on how many students in particular school districts or who live in the boundaries of a particular school district are going to use this new eligibility requirement. So you could see, I think, a more impact in some urban areas such as Indianapolis and Fort Wayne, where already the majority of students using vouchers are located.
Eric, we've got about half a minute. What other states are doing a school choice program?
Well, I think we've seen in the past year, school voucher programs have really caught on. We're seeing changes in Arizona, Texas, and Florida. Indiana has long been the leader in this. We have one of the oldest programs. We've had the largest program consistently for years. And it's interesting that we're seeing other states go from not having one to basically going to full universal. So that could be a change that we could see happen in the next few years, I think, in the State House, as other states are going to kind of go further than Indiana has gone.
That was Eric Weddle from Indiana Public Broadcasting. You've probably heard about artificial intelligence and its promises of revolutionizing the workplace. But will AI have any effect on agriculture, one of Indiana's largest industries? Clayton Baumgarth set out to explore how this technology may or may not be used by the farmers of tomorrow.
When people think of farming, a few words might come to mind: quaint, simple, and old-fashioned. But the agriculture industry is often more technologically advanced than one would think. Take, for instance, Dennis Carnahan, a farmer in southwest Indiana near Vincennes. He uses some of John Deere's latest equipment. His tractor can drive itself row by row, monitoring exactly what has and hasn't been covered. His planter changes how fast seed is released from the tank depending on how fast he's going.
On the previous planter, I'd have to go back and adjust the hydraulics with a dial and a manually, and now I can do that from the seat and adjust it on the go. So that's really helpful.
These pieces of technology help Carnahan save money on seeds and precious time during the planting season. And that's what's commercially available. Behind closed doors at places like Purdue, new ideas are being conjured up and tested regularly. John Evans is an assistant professor of agricultural and biological engineering. His lab aims to help the industry grow more crops for less cost.
We do a lot with basically trying to automate machines in general, but specifically around row crop agriculture, and how we can leverage that to make agriculture more efficient.
One of these projects is an open-source connected autonomous rover, or OSCAR for short. The goal is to create an automated rover using off-the-shelf parts, allowing industry workers the ability to survey entire fields for a fraction of the cost.
It's very flexible, kind of a Swiss Army knife, we hope, of being able to help agronomic researchers do some more high-density sampling than they probably would be able to do with just human labor.
Which brings us to artificial intelligence. Some businesses are starting to utilize AI services like ChatGPT to automate customer service lines. Artists use DALL-E to create images untouched by human hands. How could this technology affect the agriculture industry?
It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of artificial intelligence that's already being leveraged in ag. So, whether it's looking at the corn sample coming through a combine and adjusting settings automatically, which is commercially available, to all the different work that we're doing.
Machine learning, and by extension the larger umbrella of AI, already have a place in the industry. Such a big role, in fact, that Purdue recently announced a partnership with other universities to share resources at the AI Climate Institute, one of 7 new institutes created to bolster AI research across the country. Their goal is to improve the accuracy and lower the cost of accounting for greenhouse gases in farms and forests. Bruce Erickson is a clinical professor of digital agriculture at Purdue. He says much of AI's planned use is about monitoring the health of crops.
Could we measure something in agriculture, the amount of nutrient in a field or the performance of a steer or something like that in a lot. Then knowing that, could we alter the ration? Could we change the fertilizer?
AI falls under the umbrella of what is called digital agriculture, a set of tools that collect and analyze data on the industry. Digital ag has been emphasized by Cornell, Purdue, and the United Nations Project Breakthrough as playing a key role in the optimization of food systems. Erickson says as the human population continues to grow, the challenge will become making the most of the limited space we have on this planet to grow food for everyone.
We can give producers tools that can allow them to do that without them having to make too many economic sacrifices, and for it to fit into their operation.
And how will the use of AI be received? Purdue history professor Doug Hurt says that depends on how the technology interacts with the industry. In 1869, field workers in California burned combines as they saw the equipment as something that would take jobs. Hurt notes that while that was an isolated incident, it speaks to larger fears of people losing their livelihoods.
It's not going to be really an effective technology until the 20th century, early 20th century. But the fear was very clear to many people. Here's a piece of technology, equipment, metal that's going to take my job.
But by far, the most hesitance people ever had with technology in agriculture was with the introduction of growth hormones to food production, where the Food and Drug Act of 1938 was created to temper the public's concerns over what goes into the food they buy.
If you have this matter of growth hormones in milk and growth hormones for beef production, I think there's very clear evidence that there's resistance to technological change in American agriculture.
Ultimately, Hurt says it's about exactly how AI is applied that will determine whether it's received positively by the public and industry workers.
In a way, technology is neutral. It's how it's used that makes it either a problem or a benefit. And with the rapid change in technological development today, particularly chemically and genetically, I think this is really a new world.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
We're joined now by Lucas Gonzalez for more headlines from around the state. Lucas?
Thanks, Perry. Robin and Trish's House, a transitional housing program for men experiencing homelessness, recently opened spaces for families experiencing homelessness. Katie Norris runs Robin and Trish's and Hotels for Homeless. She says they tried to find a building to expand its services to women, children, and families, but finances and availability were getting in the way. They've kept a spare room for families needing emergency shelter since they opened Robin and Trish's in 2021.
That was so successful that we decided to just host Cassandra and Nancy's house here instead of waiting any longer until we found a house of our own. And now we have 5 rooms open for women and children.
Cassandra and Nancy's house is the portion of Robin and Trish's set aside for families.
Cassandra and Nancy's house is for those who can't find shelter that fits their needs elsewhere. It's when the other places are full. It's when there are no other options, or they don't qualify for any of the other options in town. We are a last resort.
Norris says Hotels for Homelessness has only received 1 donation so far in support of the families, and it's not enough to sustain the services. Apartments for people earning between 30 to 60% of the area's median income opened in Seymour this week. And while it helps with the lack of affordability in the area, advocates say more is needed. Benta Bouthier has this report.
1, 2, 3.
The Seymour Lofts have 50 units and are aimed at people earning $30,000 to $40,000 a year. But Seymour Mayor Matt Nicholson says the town is still short more than 1,000 units.
Everybody is having that same struggle. You're all talking to the same developers. You're all trying to build similar projects. For us, I've had a goal this year of setting down with 52 developers over the course of the year. I'm currently at 29.
Rent ranges from $340 to $972 for the apartments, which have 1 to 3 bedrooms. With pre-leases, about 80% of the units have been rented out. Prosperity Indiana Policy Director Andrew Bradley says the addition is welcome, given the state's need for 120,000 more low-cost housing units.
The lack of affordable and stable housing in Indiana is a crisis, and it's good news that that seems to be increasingly recognized by community leaders and policymakers.
A 2023 Prosperity Indiana report found that wage increases in the state have not kept up with rent increases. The wage needed to afford a two-bedroom apartment in Indiana rose 12% last year, but the average wage of someone renting only rose 7.5%.
Without additional investment in affordable housing, and then policies to address why our wages aren't paying enough, that we're not likely to see that gap close.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Benta Boutier.
3,000 Hoosiers were removed from Medicaid in the state's second month of the unwinding process. Indiana Public Media's Violet Comber-Weiland reports in addition to the nearly 53,000 Hoosiers who lost coverage in April.
The federal public health emergency allowed Hoosiers to retain continuous Medicaid coverage, even if they didn't meet certain income or other eligibility requirements. The emergency ended on March 31st, with Indiana beginning to unenroll Medicaid recipients over a 12-month period. The newest data from May shows that over 165,000 Hoosiers were up for renewal. Of those, about 44,000 Hoosiers lost coverage due to procedural reasons, and more than 9,000 were determined ineligible. Those who lost coverage due to procedural reasons, such as lack of updated information or paperwork, have 90 days to update paperwork and could have other coverage in the meantime. If disenrollments continue at this rate, nearly 600,000 Hoosiers could lose their Medicaid coverage. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Comber-Weiland.
Eric Holcomb says he's too busy as governor to run for Indiana's open U.S. Senate seat in 2024. Congressman Jim Banks is the only Republican currently running for the open Senate seat. And with former Governor Mitch Daniels passing on a bid, many turn to Holcomb to give Banks some competition. But Holcomb says he's too focused on his current job.
If I was sitting around throwing pencils in the ceiling tile, maybe I would have had time to think about something else. But right now, I'm going to finish the job that I started.
And Perry, the governor, says that it's not yet time for him to consider what his next options will be, but he expects to have options.
Thanks, Lucas. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Bloomington is exploring ways to make the College and Walnut Corridor through town safer and more accessible. And the town of Ellettsville has developed a vision plan it hopes will revitalize the community in northeastern Monroe County. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
I have always believed that people are at the heart of every story we tell.
Any story or interview that makes people who watch it say, I hadn't thought of it in that way. That, for me, is gold.
I like to be able to leave the viewer with some sort of emotion, whether it's outrage, whether it's someone overcoming long odds, telling a big story through an individual story.
What makes the NewsHour different is that we have time to be thoughtful about the stories that we tell, the voices that we intend to elevate.
I know the role that good journalism plays in making all of us feel more connected to each other, in helping all of us understand each other a little bit better. I see this as a mission, and I see this as a service.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. While Indiana is adding electric vehicle charging stations, the state continues to impose a special fee on people who buy those cars. As Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel reports, the extra fee has to do with how Indiana funds its roads, which is mainly through gasoline taxes.
Electric vehicles don't use gas, so Indiana imposes an annual registration fee on electric car owners. Starting in July, that fee will be more than $200. While the fee ensures EV owners pay for roads, advocates say it's not very fair, especially for EV owners that just drive locally.
In your traditional gasoline vehicles, if you're driving less, you're buying less gasoline, so you're paying less taxes. However, with your EV, you're paying that price up front, so there's no adjustment depending on your driving habits.
A recently formed state commission studies how Indiana can grow electric car manufacturing and EV jobs. Democratic Representative Carrie Hamilton is on that commission and has authored 2 bills in the past to get rid of the EV fee. She says even removing it temporarily could help encourage Hoosiers to buy electric cars.
We should be sending signals to our citizens, to prospective employers, to the marketplace that we are friendly to electric vehicles, and having a significant fee on the purchase of those vehicles is not a positive signal.
Hamilton says, unlike Indiana, many states also provide tax credits for buying electric vehicles. And advocates say a more equitable option to pay for roads might be to look at vehicle miles traveled. Electric vehicle owners in states like Oregon, Utah, and Virginia can already test this out in voluntary programs. Officials with the National Conference of State Legislatures say road funding is already going down as gas-powered cars get more fuel efficient. The group says we could see worse roads in the U.S. if we don't come up with a sustainable way to fund them. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
The city of Bloomington is collecting public input on possible changes to the College Avenue and Walnut Street corridor. Lucas Gonzalez reports that it's the next step in a project that dates back several years.
College and Walnut are Bloomington's main north-south thoroughfare, and the city wants to make it more accessible to bicyclists and pedestrians. Dozens packed city council chambers last week to offer opinions and talk about design concepts at meetings hosted by the city's planning and transportation department.
We want to consider lots of options. We want to look at the outcomes we want to see as a community, which are very focused on improving safety and improving access.
Changes to the corridor have been under consideration since 2018, but last week was the first time the city collected public input in that format. According to the city, there are about 150 crashes along the corridor each year, and over a 5-year period, there were 40 crashes resulting in serious injuries and 4 resulting in death. The transportation plan says the corridor study should consider two-way circulation, special bike roads with limited car access, restrictions on street parking for cars, protected bike lanes, multi-use paths, and designated bus-only lanes. Will Staley serves on the board of directors of Bloomington Center for Global Children, a daycare and preschool on North Walnut Street, just north of downtown. He says parents and guardians are concerned by the speed and amount of traffic on Walnut.
There is an accident, the accident isn't hitting those parked cars first, but rather both of those cars will travel into our building and potentially hurt any children.
The center responded by installing a wooden fence surrounded by large tires between itself and the sidewalk as an extra barrier of protection from crashes. Staley says the city should consider extending the sidewalk and planting trees, or at least painting lines for parking spots. His greatest concern, however, is the speed at which drivers travel on Walnut. He says traffic has slowed somewhat since the city installed a new traffic light, but drivers still often rush through yellow lights. Staley is indifferent to making College and Walnut two-ways, but believes the city should reduce traffic speeds.
Adding a little more crosswalks, maybe, so one or the other is whatever helps to reduce that speed would be fantastic for our kids.
Public opinion on the two-way option is split. At one of last week's meetings, a participant spoke strongly against any changes to the corridor, saying it's a critical piece of infrastructure for drivers. Rosenbarger says much of the discourse is focused on the two-way option. While that's not off the table, she emphasized that it's not the only option under consideration.
People tend to get focused on particular designs or particular designs as solutions. And what we're talking about right now is looking at different designs and seeing how those score against the outcomes and goals we have as a community.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Lucas Gonzalez.
Rosenbarger says the city wants to narrow a small list of design options based on the community input it has collected. That process is expected to last for several months. The town of Ellettsville has spent the past 2 years working on a plan it hopes will revitalize the community. Isabella Besfini has this story.
The town of Ellettsville hopes to rebuild and revive the surrounding area through the Envision Ellettsville Vision Plan.
First proposed in June 2021, the community has worked to put together a plan that creates a new vision for the town. Michael Farmer is town manager and utilities operation manager in Ellettsville. He says the plan involves adding new parks, trails, and roads. The town also hopes to diversify its housing by building apartments and townhomes. Farmer says the town will focus on addressing the downtown flooding issues.
Hopefully, with some mitigation of flooding, that people will, part of the envision process is to start commercially populating the downtown area.
Farmer says he hopes the plan will bring its citizens together and help build a complete community that people can enjoy living in without having to travel anywhere else.
Not only will we be able to connect internally, we'll be connected to the county and Bloomington, and so. But we have to create that gravity. We have to have somewhere people want to go.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Isabella Vesperini.
That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. lawmg.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.